As always, it is a pleasure to gather with you this morning and worship, sing songs of praise to our God, and commune with one another. I appreciate the prayer, Brother Matt. I'm feeling less anxious now. I appreciate that. And I very much appreciate the brothers leading those songs and the scripture reading this morning. You may have noticed a stark contrast between the verses that Dad read and the songs that Jonathan and Dustin have led for us. That psalm that Dad read this morning was very dark, very depressing and very sad. There's a very much a heaviness to it, as Dad said. But the songs we've sung today are very upbeat and happy and hopeful. You see that contrast. This morning I want to talk about what leads us from that state of depression to where we can sing those songs of praise that we've sung today. What makes it possible that we can feel that victory, feel that power and that hope that's in Christ. The Psalm 88 that we read this morning was written by a man by the name of Heman. He has the title the Ezrahite. Heman the Ezrahite, we don't know very much about him, but we know that he was a wise man. He had a lot of wisdom. And we know that David, King David, appointed him as one of a few elite leaders of worship in the tabernacle at that time. And so he was a very skilled musician. You know, you read in the Psalm, sometimes you'll see the heading to the chief musician. Heman may have been that person. There's a couple others it may have been, but he was one of the heads, if not the chief. Heman was a person just like you and me. He worshiped God regularly. He knew the scriptures, the law. He tried his best to follow God, but just like you and me, he faced a cold reality. He faced the reality that death was going to overtake him someday. And Heman struggled with that. And he wasn't the only one. You read through the other Psalms, David struggled with that a lot. And others, you read about some of the patriarchs, read about Moses. Some of the other kings of Judah, the faithful ones, the prophets, they all struggled with this concept because they were living faithfully day by day the best they could in the promises that God had made them. And Hebrews 11 tells us this. He tells us that these all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, were assured of them, embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. For those who say such things declare plainly that they seek a homeland. They understood the promises God had made to them. They understood that there was something awaiting them, something better, that death couldn't possibly be the end, but they still had to face death. They still had to die. And I want to reread part of that psalm. Heman there, he says to God, "Will you work wonders for the dead? Shall the dead arise and praise you? Shall your loving kindness be declared in the grave, or your faithfulness in the place of destruction? Shall your wonders be known in the dark, and your righteousness in the land of forgetfulness?" You hear the struggle that he's wrestling with in his words. He's facing a challenging reality. He doesn't want to go to this place because he doesn't know if he'll get to see the wonders of God, the blessings of God. I don't know if he's necessarily afraid of death itself, but he's afraid of the idea of being destroyed in this place, in Sheol. He's afraid of the idea of forgetting his God in Sheol. The next psalm over, written by a man named Ethan, one of Heman's counterparts, he's struggling with this too. He says, "What man can live and not see death? Can he deliver his life from the power of the grave?" This morning, I want to talk about a man that did just that. I want to talk about what Jesus did during the 3 days he was buried in that tomb. We often talk about his death and his resurrection. We just observed this a few moments ago at the table. And certainly, those are very important things that we need to understand, that Jesus had to come to earth and he had to die as a man, and that he had to be resurrected so that we could have life as well. But Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians 15 that the gospel is the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what happened during that burial period and why that's so important. There's a common misunderstanding with where Jesus was during those 3 days between his death and his resurrection. Jesus told the thief on the cross, he said, "Today you'll be with me in paradise." And so we think, okay, Jesus was in paradise, right? That's what he said. But also it was said of him and prophesied in Psalm 16, and Peter takes it up in Acts 2 in his sermon, that he was in Sheol, the Hebrew word, or Hades is the Greek word. So, which is it? I think all too often we tend to, use heaven and hell as pretty loose terms, and sometimes incorrectly, maybe not on purpose. And part of that is because the King James, I noticed in studying for this lesson, there's a lot of words like Sheol and Hades and many other words that were in that psalm that the King James translates all of them as hell. And that's not necessarily always 100% accurate when we think of hell. We think of hell as, the lake of fire, eternal punishment, gnashing of teeth, right? It's not always what it means when it says hell. The New King James is what I've chosen to use for our study today for this purpose, because the New King James operates this way. And hopefully this will kind of help you as we go through this. If you're in the Old Testament in the New King James, sometimes you'll see it translated hell, and other times you'll see the Hebrew word Sheol. Those are the same thing every time. And in the New Testament, because it's written in Greek and not Hebrew, instead of Sheol, you have the word Hades, and you'll see that word translated as such. But in the New Testament, when you see it translated as hell, hell does not equal Hades in the New Testament. Hell equals Gehenna, which is the lake of fire, the hell that we think of when we use that term. There's one exception, a Greek phrase that the Apostle Peter used in 2 Peter, and we'll talk about that later. And there are other terms that you'll see throughout the Bible, and we won't go into all of these I don't want to overcomplicate it here. But understand that heaven and hell, there's a lot of things that have to happen before you get there. And so just understand that. I want to read the Strong's definition of Sheol. It's Hades, or the world of the dead, as if a subterranean retreat, including its accessories and inmates, and you'll see it translated as grave or hell or pit in the Old Testament. And it occurred to me, this place, Sheol or Hades, is the same place, as if a subterranean retreat, right? So it's beyond earth, right? It's not here, right? We can't see it or get to it here in the flesh. It's beyond earth. And in that last part, probably the most haunting part of that definition, including its accessories and inmates. It occurred to me, this place, and we'll see it as we read what the Scripture has to say about it, this place was a prison. Hades is a prison where the souls of the deceased are kept, good and bad. I want to understand something about Jesus and something about ourselves. We are all a three-part being. What do I mean by that? Well, Jesus was composed of a body and a soul and a spirit, just like you and me. The physical body, when it perishes, and it will, the physical body is laid in a tomb, goes in the grave. We have means of today, cremation, turns back to dust. Right, the physical body, this flesh that I have, that you have, when it perishes and is no longer living, it stays here in the physical world. Jesus, when his body was beaten and bruised and crucified, when it died, it was buried in that tomb and stayed there for those few days. The Hebrew word kibbur is the physical grave. The spirit, on the other hand, That's from God. That's what God breathed into Adam to give him life. That's what's within you and me. It's the part of God that dwells within us. It dwells within our inner man, as Paul tells us. Our inner man, that's the soul we'll talk about in just a minute. The Spirit is within each of us. And Jesus said, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. Having said this, he breathed his last. This was at the end of his life. The Spirit, when he perished, went back to God and remained with him until he was resurrected. The soul, on the other hand, is the part of us, was the part of Christ that lived on, and that's what went to Sheol, or the spiritual grave, as the Hebrews called it. And Jesus talked about this place. He gave a parable. You may be familiar with the rich man and Lazarus, that parable there. I just want to highlight a couple of things in here. In Luke 16, verse 23, Jesus says, and being in torments in Hades, he's talking about the rich man, this rich man that had no regard for Lazarus, no regard for the poor, lived his life wealthy and didn't care about anyone else, didn't live for God. And being in torments in Hades, he lifted up his eyes and saw Abraham afar off and Lazarus in his bosom. Then he cried and said, hey, Father Abraham, have mercy on me and send Lazarus that he may dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am tormented in this flame. So what we see is that within the realm of Hades, if you will, this spiritual grave where the soul goes, there is a place called torments. In Old Testament, we read this morning, Abaddon or destruction, I believe is referring to the same place. This is the place within Hades where the unfaithful, the unrighteous, the selfish, the cruel, the wicked, this is where they go. This is where the rich man was. And notice how he's very conscious of his surroundings. He's very well aware of where he is, what he's done. Doesn't show a whole lot of remorse, but he's tormented. He's feeling the flame that he's in. Continuing on, but Abraham said, Son, remember that in your lifetime you received your good things, and likewise Lazarus evil things, but now he is comforted and you are tormented. And besides all this, between us and you, there is a great gulf fixed, so that those who want to pass from here to you cannot, nor can those from there pass to us. So Lazarus and Abraham, you can infer, the other faithfuls of the Old Testament, Noah and Moses and David, Heman, Ethan, all these others. This is where Jesus is referring to when he said, you'll be with me in paradise. This is a place that is not torments. This is where there's comfort. Because these men lived by faith. And this is where they went. But notice that even though these two places are very different, one is full of suffering, one is full of comfort, they're still able to communicate back and forth with one another. He says there's a chasm, a great gulf fixed that they can't cross over, but they can still communicate with one another. I wonder, is that kind of hard to deal with? Because, think about, I'll use King David as an example. King David is a man after God's own heart, and the Bible commends him for his faith and his righteousness several times. And so if King David, when he died, if he went to paradise, if his wicked sons, Amnon, the one that took advantage of his daughter, and Absalom, the one that killed him and tried to overthrow the kingdom, those wicked sons, if they're in torments and David's in paradise, then he'd get to see them, wouldn't he? He'd get to have those conversations. I wonder what that was like. It's interesting that Abraham says to the rich man, those who want to pass from here in paradise to you over there in torments cannot. Why would anybody want to do that? Why would you want to go out of comfort and into torments if not for that very reason, that there's people over there that you love, that you know. So while the faithful there in paradise are comforted from life struggles, right? They're no longer dealing with the pain and sorrow of life. They're still having to deal with these people in the afterlife. I have to imagine that was kind of hard. The Bible tells us that this place is a place of no return. Once you're there, you can't come back. Job 7:9, there near the end of that verse, so he who goes down to the grave, that's Sheol, he who goes down to the grave does not come up. When you're dead and you go there, you're stuck there and you don't come back. This place is closed off. It's barred off, gated off. The Hebrew word that's used for bars or gates there in Job 17:16, the Hebrew word is pronounced bad. It's spelled bad. I thought that's an easy way to remember this place. This is a bad situation that they found themselves in. There's no worship or praise of God in this place. Isaiah 38:18, this is King Hezekiah who's struggling with this concept. He says, for Sheol cannot thank you. Death cannot praise you. Those who go down to the pit cannot hope for your truth. Psalm 6:5, David says, for in death there is no remembrance of you. In the grave, who will give you thanks? The wicked, as we've already alluded to, they're sent there for punishment. Job 24:18 talks about how the sinners are consumed in that place. God destroys them in Abaddon. Sheol and Abaddon are under his full control, the Bible tells us. So I don't want you to think for a minute that this place is completely godless, as if God is just, doesn't have a hand in any of this. God is at work in this place. But his work in this place is to ensure that the wicked souls who rebelled against him, who persecuted his people, his goal is to see that not only their body, which is now dead, but that their soul is utterly destroyed in this place. The word, therefore, destruction or Abaddon, ruin is another term that's used there. These wicked souls go there to be ruined and destroyed. There is a bottomless pit that's alluded to. This is where the rebellion of Korah and his followers, when they stood up against Moses and Aaron and tried to overthrow their God-given authority, God opened up the earth's mouth and swallowed them up, and they perished in that pit, the Bible tells us. In Revelation, you can read about the bottomless pit too. Satan and various wicked spirits either have been or will be forced there. This is a terrible place. Tartarus is another area there. And this place, Peter tells us, is for the fallen angels. And I believe quite possibly the sinners, some wicked sinners. He tells us there that God had cast them down, the fallen angels, into this place and reserves them for judgment. He knows how to reserve the ungodly under punishment for the day of judgment. He makes that comparison between the fallen angels and the wicked sinners. And so I don't know how much leeway these fallen angels and the demons have in this place to harm the souls that are there. The Bible doesn't tell us. But if the goal is that the wicked souls go here to be destroyed, kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? But it's not all bad. The righteous in paradise, they're not abandoned there. And that's the faith that people like Heman and David and Hezekiah and Moses and all these others, this is what they were living for. In Psalm 86:13, the writer says, for great is your mercy toward me, and you have delivered my soul from the depths of Sheol. So they're holding out hope. They were holding out hope that this was not the end, that there was something better than this place. So Jesus, when he died, this is where his soul was in paradise within Hades. So what did he do while he was there? The Bible doesn't give us just a whole lot of information, but we have a few clues. We know that he was with the saints. He told the thief on the cross, today you'll be with me in paradise. right? If the thief on the cross, if he was clued into the Old Testament and some of these things that these writers had written down and had struggled with, and he's hanging on that cross knowing he's going there, he's probably afraid of that place too. But Jesus said, hey, you're going to be there with me. This is the thief that repented. He says, you're going to be there with me. I'll be there with you. That's comforting. Jesus went there. He went there and he proclaimed his victory among the fallen saints as well as the wicked and those fallen angels that were there. 1 Peter 3:18, talking about Christ being put to death in the flesh, but made alive by the Spirit, by whom also he went and preached to the spirits in prison, who formerly were disobedient, when once the divine long-suffering waited in the days of Noah, angels and authorities and powers having been made subject to him. There's some different ideas as to what exactly that phrase, preached to the spirits in prison, means. But looking at the context, talking about those spirits being formerly disobedient in the days of Noah, this is something that happened a long time ago. And he goes on talking about angels and authorities and powers. This is the fallen angels that are there in Tartarus, in the bottomless pit. Jesus proclaimed his victory among them and made them know who is the true victor in this situation, who won the battle in this situation. I can't quite wrap my head around what it must have been like to be there that day and hear that message of victory. I think about Moses. We've studied Exodus a lot recently on Wednesday nights. Moses had to lead the people. He had to lead them up to the promised land, but he couldn't go in because of his mistakes. And they inherited the promised land. They messed up. They lost the promised land. And all that turmoil throughout the Old Testament. And here comes Jesus, that prophet that Moses foretold about. Here he is now in his presence, saying, it is finished. I am victorious. Moses, you led my people this far, and now I'm going to lead you. Jesus turned hope into a reality. In Psalm 16, it was foretold of Christ, I have set the Lord always before me, because he is at my right hand, I shall not be moved. Therefore my heart is glad and my glory rejoices. My flesh also will rest in hope. For you will not leave my soul in Sheol, nor will you allow your Holy One to see corruption. And Peter takes this up in Acts 2 in his sermon. Quoting the psalm, he's speaking of David who wrote the psalm. Therefore, being a prophet, and knowing that God had sworn with an oath to him that the fruit of his body, according to the flesh, he would raise up the Christ to sit on his throne. He, foreseeing this, spoke concerning the resurrection of the Christ, that his soul was not left in Hades, nor did his flesh see corruption. Jesus went down there to free those people. Jesus went down there to ensure that this was not the end. He made their faithless hopes a reality. When Jesus resurrected, his body, soul, and spirit, they came back together. And Ephesians 4:7 tells us, but to each one of us, grace was given according to the measure of Christ's gift. Therefore, he says, when he ascended on high, he led captivity captive and gave gifts to men. Now this, he ascended, what does it mean? But that he also first descended into the lower parts of the earth. He who descended is also the one who ascended far above all the heavens, that he might fill all things. Jesus tore those bars away, as we sang this morning, from paradise. He led captivity captive. He brought those faithful men and women out of that place. Think about David again. David had another son that died at about a week old because of his mistakes. And we know where that baby went. Jesus goes down there and tells David, David, it's time for you and your son to come home. It's time for you to be with me. Jesus separated paradise from the rest of Hades, and Paul tells us this when Christ ascended to heaven. Paul talks about in 2 Corinthians 12 a vision that he has of a man, whether in the body or out of the body, I do not know. God knows how this man was caught up to paradise, to the third heaven. Paradise is no longer just across the chasm from the rest of Hades, from all those evil souls and those evil spirits. And this paradise, Revelation 1:18 tells us, this is the paradise that contains the tree of life. It is given for those who overcome life's trials. This is the paradise that awaits you and me. The heroes of faith, those who died for the gospel, our righteous loved ones that have gone on before us, and one day you and me, this is where we're going when we die. That gives me comfort. Because for me, statistically, being the young age that I am, I will have to see many of you buried and laid to rest. But it gives me great comfort knowing that I will see you again. It gives me great comfort knowing that this is not the end. That one day we'll be together again. This gives me comfort. This matters because I know, Dad, that my brothers that I never got to hold, I know where they're at. And I know I'll get to see them one day. My grandfather that I never got to hug, I'm going to get to hug him one day, and you are too. My grandmother that passed away, I'll get to see her again. That's why this matters. Because they're not having to deal with the demons, the fallen angels, and the people like that rich man that had no regard for them. Because Christ brought them out of that place and took them to a better place. He separated his people from the wicked. So what happens to the rest of Hades? Well, Jesus warned of that Gehenna fire, the eternal hell fire. He warned of this to the unloving, to those who indulge in sin, to those who corrupt and are susceptible to corruption. He says this place is a place of outer darkness with unimaginable suffering. There's weeping and gnashing of teeth here. Peter describes it as the blackness of darkness, and it's eternal. And Jesus says, when he comes to judge, and he will also say to those on the left hand, "Depart from me, you cursed, into the everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels." Revelation 20 gives us a vision of this. John writes there, "Then I saw a great white throne, and him who sat on it, from whose face the earth and the heaven fled away. And there was found no place for them. And I saw the dead, small and great, standing before God, and books were opened. And another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged according to their works, by the things which were written in the books. The sea gave up the dead who were in it, and death and Hades delivered up the dead who were in them, and they were judged, each one according to his works. Then death and Hades were cast into the lake of fire. This is the second death. And anyone not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. Those who are in, remain in Hades, and who will go there before the end of time, they will be delivered up for a brief period. They will be delivered up so that they can stand before the God that they rebelled against, that they cursed, that they hated. They will stand before that God to hear the words, "Depart from me, you cursed, into the everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels." And they don't stand a chance. But we can't avoid this fate. Those that are living, as long as you have breath in your life, can avoid such a fate. And Jesus tells us how. In Luke 12:5, he says, "But I will show you whom you should fear. Fear him who after he is killed has power to cast into hell. Yes, I say to you, fear him." That word for hell, that's Gehenna that he's using there. God has the power to kill us here. He has the power to destroy us in the afterlife. And we're called to fear that, to fear him. You know, we talk about the idea of fearing God and say, well, it's not really, don't be scared of God. And I understand what we're saying when we say that. But we need to have a respectful fear of God that understands what he is capable of. We need to understand that he is just in putting the wicked in this place. He would be just in putting me there and you because of our sin. But he is merciful. And he calls us to be different. In Matthew 7, Jesus tells us, "Enter by the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the way that leads to destruction. And there are many who go in by it. Because narrow is the gate and difficult is the way which leads to life, and there are few who find it." Be different. Those bad habits that you have, get rid of them. The things that you've learned, from those out in the world, cut it out of your life. The Bible tells us in Revelation that, the liars, the unbelievers, the cowards, the sexually immoral, adulterers, fornicators, drunkards, these people and others like them, the Bible tells us many a time, this is where they go. So be different. Don't be like the world. That's where they're going. Be separate from that. Enter by the narrow gate. Because we will all be judged someday. 2 Corinthians 5:10, "For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that each one may receive the things done in the body according to what he has done, whether good or bad." Paul's writing to the church here when he says we're all going to be judged, whether good or bad. And Christ will call the blessed to enter into the joy of their Lord. Those that lived faithfully, righteously, those of us that have lived in the hope of this better afterlife, the church is called to enter into the joy of our Lord. And Revelation 21 gives us a vision of this. John says, "Now I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. Also there was no more sea. Then I, John, saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, 'Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people. God himself will be with them and be their God. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There shall be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying. There shall be no more pain, for the former things have passed away.'" We talk about this verse quite a bit. It's in the songs that we sing even. Whatever happens in this life that's hard, the challenges we face, the struggles we share, this is the goal. That paradise that's up there in the third heaven now, that's just one step closer to this goal. This new heavens and new earth that John describes for us. This is a place where we can finally be in the presence of God without fear of destruction. This is a place where everything that we've suffered and will suffer is gone and out of our lives and forgotten, and where we dwell with the Lord eternally. So be compelled. Let this truth compel you to live for this new home. 2 Peter 3 talks about it as well. He says, therefore, since all these things will be dissolved, what manner of persons ought you to be in holy conduct and godliness, looking for and hastening the coming of the day of God, because of which the heavens will be dissolved, being on fire, and the elements will melt with fervent heat. Nevertheless, we, according to his promise, look for new heavens and a new earth in which righteousness dwells. That's the goal. That's the end. That's what we're living for today. This is where we're going. This is where we're striving for. This homeland. This homeland that those in the Old Testament believed for, hoped for. So to summarize everything, what did Jesus accomplish? He now has authority over death because he overcame it. Colossians 1:18 tells us, and he is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things he may have the preeminence. Jesus triumphantly went down to Hades, delivered his people, and was the first to be resurrected and conquer death once and for all. And so he absolutely has the authority. He says of himself in Revelation 1:18, I am he who lives and was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore. Amen. And I have the keys of Hades and of death. Jesus is in charge now. Jesus has the keys to this place. He decides who goes in, who comes out. He is the judge that will judge those of Hades and those of paradise and call them to either enter in or depart from him. He created an environment for us that cannot be conquered by death. Matthew 16:18. Jesus told Peter and the apostles, and I also say to you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. And listen to this, what he says. And the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it. Do you believe that this morning? Do you understand how empowering that is? That Christ did this for you and me. Christ made this possible so that when we die, we can have full confidence that where we're going is a place of comfort. And where we're going leads us to that new heavens and that new earth where righteousness dwells, forever removed from the sorrows of this life. Do you believe that this morning? Do you believe that the church of Christ, his church, cannot be conquered by Hades? The gospel message hinges on the events that we've talked about today. 1 Corinthians 15:1-4. Moreover, brethren, I declare to you the gospel which I preached to you, which also you received, and in which you stand, by which also you are saved, if you hold fast that word which I preached to you, unless you believed in vain. For I delivered to you first of all that which I also received, that Christ died for our sins, according to the Scriptures, and that he was buried, and that he rose again the third day, according to the Scriptures. This gospel is what saves us. The fact that Jesus came to earth to die, the fact that he spent those 3 days in Hades proclaiming his victory, delivering the saints, and conquered that place and rose again that third day, that's what makes it all possible. He's what makes it all possible. He's what made this all possible. So find yourself taking part in that gospel. Romans 6:3-4 tells us, for do you not know that as many of us as were baptized into Christ were baptized into his death? Therefore we were buried with him through baptism into death, that just as Christ was raised from the dead by the glory of the Father, even so we also should walk in newness of life. The gospel is the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. And when we are baptized, we're taking part in that death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. That's what makes us a part of the church. That's the community that will not be overcome by the gates of Hades. And so if you are not a part of that community this morning, why not? If you are not a part of that community this morning, we've already studied where you're going, unless you make a change. And I beg you to make that change. Christ begs you to make that change. Don't find yourself still sitting there in Hades with the fallen. Find yourself in a place of peace with God, so that when you die, inevitably it will happen. You find yourself in paradise and comfort with the saints, and you'll know then full well what awaits you after that. If you're not a Christian this morning, make that choice. Be baptized. Take part in that gospel message that saves you. And if you are a Christian this morning, I hope these things have helped you, given you some comfort, some peace, some hope. We're going to sing a song in just a minute. Last verse of that, if I can find it. No guilt in life, no fear in death. This is the power of Christ in me. From life's first cry to final breath, Jesus commands my destiny. No power of hell nor scheme of man can ever pluck me from his hand till he returns or calls me home. Here in the power of Christ, I'll stand. If you're a Christian, believe these words, believe these truths, and find some hope and comfort in that. If you want the prayers of the church to help you with that, if you'd like to study, whatever you need, we're here and we're willing to help you. If you have a need this morning, whether it be baptized or otherwise, please come forward and have a seat on the front, and we'll assist you as we stand.